For the first 30 seconds of this video, imagine discovering why a simple yellow circle with a mouth managed to conquer arcade, homes, pop culture, music, fashion, and even psychology itself. As we will uncover how Pac-Man was designed to be irresistible, why it attracted people who had never touched a video game before, how its mechanics secretly trained your brain, how its ghosts were smarter than they looked, how it survived decades of technological evolution, and why, even today, Pac-Man remains instantly recognizable across the entire planet. Because by the end of this video, you will realize that Pac-Man was never just a game. It was a perfectly engineered cultural phenomenon disguised as a cute maze. Pac-Man became the most iconic arcade game ever, not because it had the best graphics, the loudest sounds, or the most advanced technology, but because it understood humans better than humans understood themselves. Arriving in arcades at a time when video games were dominated by spaceships, explosions, and alien invasions, which made Pac-Man feel like an alien concept itself. A game with no guns, no violence, no text, and no complicated story, yet one that communicated everything instantly through movement, sound, and instinct. Creating a universal language that anyone could understand in less than 5 seconds just by watching the screen. The genius of Pac-Man begins with its simplicity, because the moment you look at the screen, you know exactly what to do: eat dots. Avoid ghosts, survive, and score points, which sounds basic until you realize that simplicity is one of the hardest things to design correctly, as Pac-Man's maze was carefully crafted to create tension, rhythm, and flow, forcing players to constantly make decisions under pressure while believing they were fully in control, when in reality the game was guiding their behavior at every turn with perfect psychological precision. One of the most fascinating reasons Pac-Man became iconic is that it was designed to appeal to everyone, not just hardcore arcade players. Because its creator wanted a game that women, families, and casual players could enjoy, which was revolutionary at a time when arcades were loud, aggressive spaces dominated by sci-fi shooters, and Pac-Man broke that mold with bright colors, friendly characters, and a playful tone that felt welcoming instead of intimidating, turning arcades into social spaces where people gathered not just to compete, but to watch, laugh, and cheer. The characters themselves played a massive role in Pac-Man's rise, because Pac-Man was not a spaceship or a soldier. He was a character with personality, emotions, and purpose, constantly hungry, constantly chased, constantly moving, making him relatable in a strangely human way, while the ghosts were not generic enemies, but distinct with different behaviors, meaning the game felt alive, unpredictable, and endlessly replayable, even when players did not consciously understand why things felt different each time. Sound design also helped Pac-Man dominate arcades, because the iconic Waka Waka sound did more than indicate movement. It created rhythm, tension, and satisfaction, turning every second of gameplay into a musical experience that synced with the player's heartbeat, making silence feel dangerous and sound feel comforting. Which is why, even today, a single Pac-Man sound effect can instantly trigger nostalgia in anyone who has ever stood in front of an arcade cabinet. Another key reason Pac-Man became legendary was its difficulty curve, because the game starts easy enough to feel fair but quickly becomes challenging in a way that feels personal, as if the game itself is testing you, daring you to do better, learn patterns, and master the maze, which created the perfect loop of frustration and motivation, where players lost not because the game cheated, but because they believed they could do better next time, making every failure feel like an invitation instead of a punishment. Pac-Man also mastered the art of visual clarity, because everything on screen was readable at a glance. From the maze layout, to enemy positions, to power pellet, which allowed players to think strategically even in moments of chaos, turning panic into planning, and fear into focus. And this balance between chaos and control is what kept players glued to the screen, coin after coin, hour after hour. The power pellets themselves are a brilliant example of why Pac-Man became iconic, because in a single mechanic, they completely flipped the emotional experience of the game, transforming fear into power, turning predators into prey, and giving players a temporary sense of dominance that felt exhilarating, cathartic, and deeply satisfying, reinforcing the idea that timing, patience, and courage could completely change the outcome, a lesson that resonated far beyond the arcade screen. Pac-Man's influence exploded beyond arcades because it was perfectly designed for mass appeal, quickly appearing on home consoles, merchandise, cartoons, music, and pop culture references, becoming one of the first video game characters to transcend gaming itself, proving that games could create icons just as powerful as movie characters or comic book heroes. Long before anyone believed video games could matter culturally, another reason Pac-Man became immortal is that it aged gracefully because while graphics evolved and technology advanced, Pac-Man's core design remained timeless. Still fun, still challenging, still instantly understandable, which is why modern players can enjoy Pac-Man just as much as players did decades ago, making it a rare example of a game that did not become obsolete but instead became classic. Pac-Man also introduced the concept of mastery in a way that fascinated players because behind its simple appearance was a deeply complex system of patterns, routes, and strategies, allowing skilled players to push the game to its limits, chase perfect runs, and even discover the infamous kill screen, turning Pac-Man into a legend, not just for casual players, but for competitive gamers as well. Perhaps the most important reason Pac-Man became the most iconic arcade game ever is that it captured a feeling, the feeling of being chased, of outsmarting danger, of learning through repetition, of finding joy in improvement, and of sharing that joy with others watching nearby, making Pac-Man not just a game you played, but an experience you shared, talked about, and remembered. Pac-Man proved that games did not need realism to feel real, did not need violence to be exciting, and did not need complexity to be deep. Showing the world that great game design is about understanding people, emotions, and instincts, which is why Pac-Man still matters today. Not as a relic of the past, but as a blueprint for everything that came after. If you enjoyed this deep dive into why Pac-Man became the most iconic arcade game ever, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment sharing your favorite Pac-Man memory, and share this video with anyone who still remembers the sound of coins dropping into an arcade machine, because there are many more legendary gaming stories waiting to be uncovered.